Hey everybody, it's Mike for GunsInThe701.com's Badass of the Week. That's right, every week we bring you a new and exciting badass of history. This week we're covering what they like to call the softer side of the species, the female. Nancy Wake. She may have been beautiful, she may have been soft, but at the same time, she was deadly. Born in Roseneath, Wellington, New Zealand, on 30th of August, 1912, Wake was the youngest of 6 children. She was a Maori through her great-grandmother. In 1914, her family moved to Australia and settled at North Sydney. Shortly thereafter, her father, Charles Augustus Wake, returned to New Zealand, and her mother, Ella Wake, raised the children on her own. In Sydney, Wake attended the North Sydney Household Arts Home Science School. At the age of 16, she ran away and worked as a nurse. With 200 pounds in her pocket that she inherited from her aunt, she journeyed to New York City, then London, and there she trained herself as a journalist. In the 1930s, she worked in Paris and later for Hearst newspapers as a European correspondent. Now, she witnessed the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi movement and saw the roving Nazi gangs randomly beating up Jewish men and women in the streets of Vienna. In 1937, Wake met wealthy French industrialist Henry Edmond Fiocca, whom she married on the 30th of November, 1939. Now, she was living in Marseille, France, when Germany invaded. Now, during the war in France, Wake served as an ambulance driver. After the fall of France in 1940, she joined the escape network of Captain Ian Garrow, which became the Pat O'Leary Line. Now, the Gestapo called her the White Mouse, because they were good at downplaying the fact that she was killing all of them. Anyway, I don't know. Could have given her something a little better than that, but oh well. The resistance exercised caution with her missions. Her life was in constant danger, with the Gestapo tapping her telephones and intercepting her mail. In November of 1942, the Wehrmacht troops occupied Vichy, France. In case you don't know, Vichy, France means the French that capitulated to the Nazis and helped them. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to spit in French. Mon Dieu. Now, Operation Torch started then. This gave the Germans and the Gestapo unrestricted access to all parts of Vichy, France, and made life more dangerous for Wake. When the network was betrayed that same year, she decided to flee France. Her husband, Henry Fiocca, I'll never get his name right, but there we go. He stayed behind. Now, he was later captured, tortured, and executed by the Gestapo, but during the entire war, Nancy didn't know this. Now, Wake described her tactics as a little powder and a little drink on the way, and I'd pass their German post and wink and say, "Do you want to search me? God, what a flirtatious little bastard I was." That was her talking, by the way. Now, in early 1943, in the process of getting out of France, Wake was picked up with a whole trainload of people and was arrested in Toulouse, but was released 4 days later. Now, the head of the O'Leary line, Albert Girassi, he managed to have her released by claiming she was his mistress and was trying to conceal her infidelity to her husband, all of which was untrue. Now, she succeeded in crossing the Pyrenees to Spain, and until the end of the war, she was unaware her husband's death, which she subsequently blamed herself for. Now, most of the operations of Wake's SOE, or the Special Operations Executive, we'll just say SOE from now on, were in or near LAUER Department. Now, after reaching Britain, Wake joined the Special Operations Executives, or SOE, a British organization formed in the 1940s to conduct espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance in German-occupied Europe and to aid local resistance movements. And she was trained in several programs. Vera Atkins, who was the senior female in the SOE overseeing the agents going into France, recalls her as a real Australian bombshell. Tremendous vitality, flashing eyes. Everything she did well. Training reports record that she was very good and a very fast shot and possessed excellent fieldcraft. She was noted to put men to shame by her cheerful spirit and strength of character. Now, on the 29th through the 30th of April 1944, as part of a 3-person freelance team headed by John Hind Farmer, codenamed Herbert, Wake parachuted into Aveyron province in France. Resistance leader Henry Tardivat discovered Wake tangled in a tree. He remarked, "Hope that all the trees in France bear such beautiful fruits this year." To which she replied, cut out that bullshit and get me out of this damn tree. Dennis Rake, a radio operator, was the third member of the team. Now, the team was to be a liaison between London and the local Marquise group, or French resistance, headed by Emile Colondan, codenamed Gaspard. Now, SOE began sending large amounts of arms, equipment, and money. No word if they sent lawyers. Wake's duties were pinpointing locations at which the materials and monies were parachuted in, collecting it, allocating it among Marquise, including pay to individual soldiers. Wake carried with her a list of the targets the Marquise were to destroy before the invasion of France by the Allies, which would take place on June 6. Now, the destruction of communication lines and other facilities throughout France would hinder German response to the invasion. Now, the reach of the Marquise exceeded their grasp. On May 20th, Calendon, or known as Gaspard, declared a general mobilization of resistance fighters, collecting in total about 7,000 men divided into 3 groups. His objective was to demonstrate that the resistance was able to liberate areas from the Germans with its own forces. On June 2nd, the Germans launched a probing attack on Gaspard's base at Mount Monchet. On the 10th of June, the Germans launched a larger attack, and on the 20th of June encircled Gaspard's position and forced the resistance fighters to flee after taking heavy casualties. Wake and the members of her team accompanied groups of the Marquise in a 3-day, 150-kilometer retreat westward to the village of Saint-Satin. I know I butchered that in French, and I don't care. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. During the flight from the Germans, Rake, the radio operator, left his radio equipment and codes behind. You would think that would be the first thing he would grab, but the SOE team needed to be in contact with London. Now, the nearest SOE radio and operator were in Châteauroux. Wake said that she borrowed a bicycle and rode it to Châteauroux, found a radio nearby, updated London on the situation, and then bicycled back to Saint-Satin, traveling 500 kilometers in 72 hours. Fortunately for her, there were few Germans in the area through which she had bicycled. Now, after her bicycle ride, the freelance team, with another recent arrival named Roger, a 19-year-old American Marine, returned to LAUER department to join the resistance groups of Henry Tardivant, who was the guy who discovered her tangled in the tree. In July, 2 more Americans, Reeve Shiley and John de Koven Alsop, they joined the team as instructors. Neither spoke much French, and Shealy was nearly blind, if not wearing his thick lens eyeglasses. But he actually impressed the Marquis with his immaculately tailored military uniform. Both proved to be effective instructors. Now, Wake said that she and Tardivant initiated a series of attacks on German convoys and fought off an attack on their camp by the Germans, in which 7 French Marquis were killed. Her principal job, however, continued to be to organize the reception and distribution of arms and materials for the resistance groups, which was parachuted into LAUER nearly every other night. Wake claimed that she participated in the raids that destroyed a Gestapo headquarters in Montluchon, killing 38 Germans. At one point, Wake said she discovered that the men were using 3 girls as prostitutes and mistreating them. Now, she coerced the Marquise to release the women, to whom she provided a wash and new clothes. Now, Nancy Wake set 2 of the girls free, but feeling uneasy about the third, she suspected the third girl was a German spy. After interrogating and exposing her, Wake ordered the resistance group to shoot the informer. They did not have the heart to kill her in cold blood. But when Wake insisted that she would have performed the execution, they capitulated. Nancy Wake claimed that the girl spy spat at the French while facing the firing squad. Wake showed no regrets for the execution. Wake also said that she had killed an SS sentry with her bare hands to prevent him from raising the alarm during the raid. During the 1990s television interview, when asked what had happened to the sentry who spotted her, Wake simply drew her finger across her throat. They taught this judo chop stuff with the flat of the hand at SOE, and I practiced away at it, but this was the only time that I used it. Whack! And it killed him almost outright. She said, even I was surprised. After the invasion of southern France by the American military forces on August 15th, the resistance groups harried the retreating Germans. Her friend, Tardivat, was badly wounded and would lose a leg to amputation during the victory celebration in Vichy. Wake learned of the death of her husband in mid-September, and she and other members of the freelance team, their job complete, returned to Great Britain. Now, Nancy Wake did not like killing people, but in wartime, she once told an interviewer, and quote, "I don't see why women should just wave our men a proud goodbye and then sit around knitting them baklavas," unquote. In another quote, Wake said, "I was not a very nice person, and it did not put me off my breakfast." In another quote, she said, "I was never afraid. I was too busy to be afraid." Immediately after the war, she was awarded the George Medal, the United States Medal of Freedom, the Medal de la Résistance, and thrice the Croix de Guerre. Now, she worked for the intelligence department at the British Air Ministry, attached to the embassies in Paris and Prague. Wake left Australia and moved back to England. She worked as an intelligence officer in the department of the Assistant Chief of the Air Staff of the Air Ministry in Whitehall. She resigned in 1957 after marrying an RAF officer, John Forward, in December of that year. They relocated to Australia in early 1960s, maintaining her interest in politics. Wake was endorsed as a candidate at the 1966 federal elections for the Sydney seat of Kingsford Smith, and despite recording a swing of 6.9% against the sitting Labour member, Wake was again unsuccessful. Around 1985, Wake and John Forward left Sydney to retire to Port Macquarie. In 1985, Wake published her autobiography, The White Mouse. Later, after 40 years of marriage, her second husband, John Forward, died at Port Macquarie on the 19th of August in 1997. The couple had no children. Now, she had sold her medals to fund herself, saying, "There was no point in keeping them. I'll probably just go to hell, and they'll melt anyway." In 2001, Wake left Australia for the last time and immigrated to London. In 2003, Wake chose to move to the Royal Star and Garter Home for Disabled Ex-Service Men and Women in Richmond, London, where she remained until her death. Wake died on August 7th, 2011 at the age of 98 at Kingston Hospital after being admitted with a chest infection. She had requested that her ashes be scattered at Montluçon in central France. Her ashes were scattered near the village of Vernix, which is near that location, on the 11th of March of 2013. She is the inspiration for many female protagonists written in both spy movies and more. Nancy Wake didn't want to just sit around and knit. She wanted to be part of the action. She wanted to have her hands dirty, and she did exactly that. And Nancy Wake is a true 100% badass. Thanks for tuning in to our weekly Badass of the Week right here on GunsInThe701.com. Every week we try to give you a new badass, and we always like to have your suggestions if you got someone in history that deserves that status. You can contact us at GunsInThe701.com. And if you're feeling rather benevolent and would like to spare a little change, I know it's tough nowadays, but we always like to keep our equipment up to date, improve our studios and more, and have all kinds of new stuff for everybody. Well, you can drop us a line, of course, at that little QR code up in the corner to help us move along. You can also head over to GunsInThe701.com and check out our store for all kinds of cool items that will look good on anybody. And check our back catalog of Guns in the 701 episodes, 701 Nation, and of course, our Badass of the Week. Until next week on GunsInThe701.com, I'm Mike, reminding you what my buddy Clay always says: keep your powder dry and stay safe, you bunch of badasses.